So what's up guys, it's Ash here and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow or the second variation. But just before we get started guys, please be sure to drop this a like as it does really help me out. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics. For the defensive start, I like to have this on balance. This is because having this on balance will give you the best control over your defense, where you're able to press when you need to press, and then when you want to drop back, be a little bit more passive, you're also able to do that. If you feel more comfortable using the pressure tactics though, that is also fine, but I would suggest getting used to balanced if possible. Moving on to the width guys, I like to have this on 35. The reason for this is that we can primarily defend in a nice narrow and compact shape, which will stop our opponent being able to run right through the middle of us and cut us to pieces. The reason we don't have the width crazy low though is because it's still important to maintain some of the natural width so that we can cover the wider areas in case an opponent tries an attack down the wing. Moving on to the depth guys, I like to have this on 55. This is because it's a really nice balanced depth where we're not always going to be pinned back because we're not going to have like a super deep defensive line, and on the flip side we're not always going to get one through balled and destroyed every time because our defensive line won't be crazy high. So we kind of like to go for something in between where it's neither too deep nor too high, and you really get that balance as a result. Now moving on to build-up play guys, I actually use fast build-up with this formation. The reason for this is the 4-1-2-1-2 is actually very good for those quick little 1-2 passes, and this with the fast build-up instruction or the tactic actually works quite well because your players will make those quick movements so you can make the fast passes between the players, because there are a lot of diamonds to play between in the 4-1-2-1-2. You don't have to use fast build-up though. The most meta option would probably still be balanced as it gives you the most control and variety, but honestly I am enjoying using fast build-up at the moment. Moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest using direct passing. The reason I use direct passing is because it's by far the most meta option in the game. Basically direct passing will make your attackers like bunch up against the opposition defenders, so you can do the very overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. Players will also make those extra movements in the box so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee the goals. Direct passing is an absolute must in my opinion. Now moving on to the attacking width, I have this on 40. The reason for this is it gives us a nice narrow attack, but it's not too narrow at the same time. If we have the width too low, then our players are just way too close together, even for a narrow formation, and it doesn't work out too nicely. On the flip side, you also don't want to have the width too high, otherwise it becomes like a wider formation, which is not what the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow is. So I kind of like to go for 40 as it keeps us narrow, but not too narrow. Moving on to players in box guys, I have this on 4. This is so we can get some players into the box to create those chances, but at the same time we don't overcommit everybody into the box, so if we lose out we're not always going to get counter attacked. As for corners and free kicks, I have these on 1 because there is a set piece routine that I use. There is a link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen if you are interested. Now moving on to the players you want to use guys, I'm just going to give some suggestions on each position because a lot of people ask in the comments what types of players they should be using in each position for a formation, and they'll often like list specific names and they're like, is this player okay in this position? So I'm just going to give you my basic guidelines for each position to help you guys out so you can make more informed decisions. So for the two strikers, what I like to do is I like to go for a balance between these two players. So I like to have a more creative player on the left hand side and then a more clinical finisher player on the right hand side. The reason I do this is because I feel like we get a lot more out of the attack this way. If we have just two out and out strikers that are just there to finish off chances, it restricts your attack in more ways than you'd think, because these players are only capable of just making those runs in behind, receiving crosses and shooting basically. But if you implement a more creative player into the strike force, you can actually do a lot more with the strikers as a whole. For example, this player could sit a little bit deeper because he's a bit creative, and then he could wait for the other striker to run in behind, and then you could play the ball. That's just one scenario, but I just feel like you have a lot more variety when you have a creative player and an actual finisher in these positions. Moving on to the cam, guys, I suggest using a very nice technical player, somebody that is nice and agile, somebody that can work angles very well, and obviously somebody with a really good passing and dribbling ability, and obviously somebody that can also finish off those chances. So you want a really nice attacking player in the cam position, because the cam is the main playmaker in this formation. If you use a slow, clunky player that has no creative ability, you might struggle to actually create any chances with this formation. Moving on to the right centre mid, I like to go for a more box-to-box style midfielder. This is somebody that is going to attack and defend, so I would suggest somebody with a high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in both the attack and the defence, but just ensure that this player has a nice well-rounded card so that they are capable of doing a bit of everything. Moving on to the CDM, go for a more defensive-minded player. This is somebody that is going to stay back, break up the play, and ensure you are as good defensively as possible. So somebody with a medium-high work rate is perfect, as you get the maximum contribution in the defence and they're not too bothered about going forward. Moving on to the left centre mid, you can use an actual attacker here, or you can use whoever you want, but just be aware, like, depending on what type of players you use, it will affect how this formation plays out, if that makes sense. So basically this player is not actually going to have to play as a centre mid when we don't have the ball, so you really don't have to worry about their defensive stats. So you can go for an actual attacker here, somebody like an Mbappe or a Neymar. This will make more sense in the player instructions, we'll get to that in a moment. Moving on to the fullbacks, I like to go for a balance between the two. I go for a more attacking fullback in the left back position in Roberto Carlos. This is somebody that's actually going to contribute on the attack and go forward for me. And then in the right back position, I've got somebody that is going to be a bit more defensive and just stay back. That's a balance thing that I like to go for. You guys don't have to do that, but again, it might affect your player instructions. As for the centre backs and the keeper, these just need to be the full meta players. There's not too much to say about them. Now moving on to the player instructions, guys, on the left striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. The reason I have him on stay central is because it's important that he doesn't go drifting off into those wider areas, especially since he is a striker. So it is important to at least keep him in the central area. And because this is my more creative player, I have him on mixed attack. This is so he's not always just making those runs in behind, and he can do a bit more in the attack. Sometimes he can drop a little bit deeper and get more involved in the build-up, for example. So on my creative player, stay central, mixed attack works very well. On the more clinical finisher player, I have him on stay central for the same reasons as the left striker, but I also have him on getting behind. Because this player's whole purpose is to just finish off those chances, we do want him making those runs in behind so he does get into those best positions possible. Moving on to the cam, guys, I like to have him on comeback on defense and get into the box for cross. The reason we have him on comeback on defense is because it's going to make this formation defend in a 4-4-2. Why, you might ask, is because the 4-4-2 is one of the best defensive formations in the game. So we're going to attack in the 4-1-2-1-2, but we're going to defend in a 4-4-2, which is going to make us very nice and solid in defense. So comeback on defense means this player will defend as a right mid. Moving on to get into the box for cross, the reason we have this is because we also want him to fly into the penalty area to finish off those chances if needs be. If you have him on balanced crossing runs, sometimes he can be a little bit hesitant to get into the penalty area, but you guys can have him on balanced if you want, doesn't really matter. Moving on to the right centre mid, the more box-to-box player, we have him on the default settings and cover centre. We have him on default settings because he is a box-to-box player, so we don't want to restrict him all that much. The only important thing is that we have him on cover centre, so he does defend as one of the centre mids in the 4-4-2. Moving on to the CDM, the defensive player, we have him on stay back while attacking, cut passing lanes and cover centre. We have him on stay back because obviously we don't want him going forward. Cover centre means he will defend as one of the centre mids, and cut passing lanes means he's always going to look to break up the play. Moving on to the left centre mid, where we use an actual attacker, we have him on get forward, get into the box cross, and most importantly cover wing. Because this is an actual attacker in the centre mid spot, we put him on get forward so he does join the attack at all times, which is what we want him to do. We have him on get into the box for cross so he isn't hesitant to get into the penalty area, and then we have him on cover wing so he does actually defend as a left mid in the 4-4-2. This is why I said it's not important to use somebody with really good defensive stats, as they're not actually going to have to play in that centre mid role. Moving on to the fullbacks, guys, in the left back position, my more attacking fullback, I have him on balanced attack and overlap. We have him on balanced attack and overlap because sometimes we need extra width in this formation, so he's going to go forward for us and make the overlapping runs to give us a wider option. Moving on to the right back, the more defensive fullback, I have him on stay back while attacking and overlap. We have him on stay back, so we always have at least 3 defenders back at a time, and we also have him on the overlap run type, so he will make those overlapping runs to add extra width if we do send him on a run forward. As for the centre backs and the keeper, these are on the default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-1-2-1-2. If you have enjoyed, please be sure to drop us a like, sub to the channel if you are new, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. With all that aside guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.